You never forget the eyes of a creature who's known pain. That look, somewhere between pleading and resignation, sits in your chest long after you've walked away. For me, it was an elephant named Moyo. I first saw him in the spring of 2019, during an undercover welfare check at a traveling circus camp just outside Marseille. I was volunteering with a wildlife protection group that cooperated with French and EU authorities on suspected animal cruelty cases. Moyo wasn't on our list. We were there to inspect the lions. But as we were leaving, I heard a chain rattle, metal grinding on metal in a slow, hopeless rhythm. Behind the faded red and white striped canvas, I saw the back end of a large elephant. A worker tried to block our path, saying the elephant was part of the show and not up for inspection. That set off alarms in my mind. Moyo was a young bull, probably no more than 12 years old, though his condition made it hard to tell. His frame was underweight, his skin dull and peeling. One ear hung oddly, likely from an old injury, and scars marred his hind legs, burns, perhaps, or friction wounds from constant chaining. He stood in a narrow metal pen, barely large enough for him to turn. No bedding, no enrichment, just concrete and silence. He didn't trumpet or sway. He didn't react at all. Just watched me, blinking slowly, as if unsure whether I was real. We demanded to see his records. The circus had none. They couldn't or wouldn't tell us where he came from, how long he'd been there, or when he'd last seen a vet. His trunk moved slowly toward the empty feed bin, nudging it, hoping. It was empty. I didn't sleep that night. I called every contact I had. For 2 weeks, we pushed through bureaucratic tangle, permits, inspections, legal procedures. Finally, after mounting public pressure and an intervention by local authorities, the circus was forced to relinquish Moyo. He was sedated for transport. I remember standing near the trailer as they loaded him in, tears on my face and hands trembling. He was so quiet, you'd think a creature his size would resist, trumpet, flail, but he simply lay down when the tranquilizer took hold. Not with fear, with relief, maybe, or surrender. The journey to Tula Wildlife Refuge took nearly 18 hours. We stopped every 4 hours to check his vitals and offer hydration. When he woke in the transport crate the next day, he thumped his trunk once against the bars, then went still again. Tula is not a zoo. It's a rehabilitation and transition center in central Spain that specializes in recovering animals rescued from neglect, abuse, or illegal captivity. Their elephant paddock spans 30 acres of rolling hills, mud baths, and shaded trees. But it wasn't the land that Moyo needed first. It was time. When we opened the crate, he wouldn't come out. We tried everything, coaxing, food, even other elephants. Finally, we backed off and just left the door open. He emerged on his own 5 hours later. I was there when he stepped out. His movement was cautious, unnatural, like he had to relearn his own weight. His feet, unaccustomed to soft earth, fumbled in the grass. But when he reached the first mud patch, he paused, sniffed, and then, without warning, collapsed into it. He didn't roll or play at first. He just lay there, eyes closed, as though sinking into something remembered from long ago. That night, he stood under the stars, trunk lifted to the wind. I watched him from the observation deck and whispered, "You're free now, Moyo." Recovery wasn't quick. Moyo had been deprived of more than food and space. He'd lost trust. In people, in other elephants, maybe even in himself. The first few weeks, he wouldn't interact with the others. The herd at Tula had 2 matriarchs, both older females named Suri and Leela, rescued years prior from a safari park in Eastern Europe. Suri tried to approach Moyo several times, her trunk reaching out gently, but he always backed away. But then came the rainy night in June. I remember it clearly because I was on watch duty. A storm had rolled in fast. The sky cracked with lightning, and the herd began to group tightly together, as they always did when frightened. Moyo panicked. We watched on camera as he ran erratically across the paddock, crashing into a fence post, bellowing, his first real vocalization since arriving. Before we could get outside, Suri had broken from the group and trotted toward him. She didn't approach head-on, just walked slowly alongside him, mirroring his path. Eventually, she stopped and trumpeted softly. He paused. Then, hesitantly, he stepped toward her. They touched trunks, briefly. Just a second, but that was all it took. From then on, something changed. He followed her back to the group. He started bathing with them, eating beside them, even dozing in their shade during midday naps. He began to vocalize more. Small rumbles at first, then full-bodied calls that echoed across the hills. His physical health improved too. Regular meals, foot care, enrichment activities, all helped him regain strength and confidence. He gained over 500 kilograms in his first year and started displaying normal behaviors again: dust bathing, trunk sparring, mock charges. I spent every week at Tula during that time. Feeding, cleaning, documenting his progress. But mostly, I just sat near him. He liked company, but only at a distance. He'd stand nearby, watching, his trunk playing with bits of hay or twigs. Sometimes he'd make this low, vibrating hum. It felt like he was talking, but to himself. We knew Tula was a halfway home. Their goal is rehabilitation and rehoming, not permanent housing. But finding a long-term solution for a bull elephant isn't easy. Sanctuaries are limited, and zoos, well, that's another world entirely. We were cautious. Moyo had suffered under human care once. We wouldn't let it happen again. Then came a letter from Edenview Zoo in the Netherlands. Edenview had just completed construction on one of the largest, most advanced elephant enclosures in Europe. Over 60 hectares of semi-wild land, a multi-generational herd, and a dedicated behavioral therapy team for traumatized elephants. The facility was managed by wildlife biologists and partnered closely with African reserves to support conservation and repopulation efforts. I was skeptical until I visited. It didn't feel like a zoo. It felt like a reserve. Their bull herd was stable and socially complex. They had space to roam, a structured introduction process for new arrivals, and a dedicated staff who actually listened. And then something happened I didn't expect. They asked me to come too. Not just for the transition, but permanently. To be Moyo's person, the one he already trusted. I didn't hesitate. The process took 6 months. Permits, training, health checks, behavioral assessments. Moyo had to pass several stages to be considered ready for a move. He did, brilliantly. The day we left Tula, I walked beside the crate. Moyo was calm. He didn't need sedation this time. As the doors closed, he looked at me, then rumbled, long and low. I laid my hand against the steel. "We're going home, big guy." The transport truck rumbled through the early hours of a Dutch morning as we neared Edenview Zoo. The skies were still gray, a low mist rising over the fields. Inside the specially designed crate, Moyo stood alert but calm. This was no longer the withdrawn elephant we'd found behind canvas at that circus 2 years prior. This was Moyo, stronger, aware, and prepared. His transition into Edenview would be slow and deliberate. The staff here didn't believe in rushing introductions, especially with bulls. Unlike cows, who tend to form cohesive matriarchal units, bulls live differently, more solitary, but not antisocial. Edenview had a semi-structured male herd, and Moyo was to be the youngest of the group. When the doors opened, the first thing he did was lift his trunk to the air. The scents of damp earth, trees, and distant elephants drifted in. He rumbled, a low, probing sound. Then he stepped out. Edenview's elephant habitat sprawled across natural terrain, rolling grasslands, shallow waterholes, forests planted decades ago in preparation for this vision. It was enclosed, yes, but barely. No obvious barriers, no concrete pits. It didn't look like any zoo I had ever seen. The first 3 weeks, Moyo remained in a protected area within view of the herd but not in physical contact. He could see them, hear them, and smell them. They could do the same. He spent his days walking the perimeter, sometimes pacing, sometimes pausing to splash in the man-made waterhole. We monitored his reactions carefully. Everything was logged: his posture, appetite, vocalizations, signs of aggression or curiosity. He showed neither fear nor dominance, but an intense alertness, as if trying to decode every detail of this new world. The first interaction came with Goma. Goma was a 22-year-old bull, known in Edenview for his calm nature. He had been brought here from Namibia as part of a breeding and conservation program and had since become something of a stabilizing force in the male group. When Goma approached the fence between them, we all held our breath. Moyo didn't retreat. He stood tall. His ears flared slightly, and then he reached out his trunk. The two touched. Briefly. Then again. A longer press this time. They stood like that for nearly 10 minutes, trunk tips brushing, pausing, brushing again. The behavioral team called it the handshake. Over the next days, other bulls approached, Batu, older and more assertive, then Nico, young and unpredictable. With each one, Moyo held his ground, not aggressively, but with a confidence none of us had seen in him before. He wasn't just surviving anymore. He was establishing himself. The full integration took nearly 4 months. We rotated the group daily, first allowing him and Goma supervised time together in the open space. Then Nico. Then, finally, all of them. The first time the 4 bulls shared the entire range together, there was posturing, dust tossing, a few trumpets, a mock charge from Nico. But nothing escalated. Moyo had found his place, not as a dominant, but not as a subordinate either. He was measured, watchful. When the others sparred playfully, he often joined. When they grazed quietly, he stayed near. And when the sun dipped low in the evening, he'd sometimes wander off alone, to the far end of the field, where the trees met the fence, and stand still, as if remembering something. One afternoon, I found him there, swaying slightly in the breeze. I approached slowly, sat down several meters away. We didn't need to be close. He knew I was there. Moyo, I said softly, you're not that scared animal anymore. He turned his head just slightly. Then rumbled, low and even. I started documenting his progress for the public. Not in the flashy social media way, but through long-form reports, talks with schools, and small community presentations. Moyo became part of a larger conversation, about where elephants belong, what captivity means, and what rehabilitation can look like. He became the centerpiece of Edenview's new educational program for young visitors. Not to perform, not to entertain, but to represent resilience. In the center's viewing dome, visitors would stand behind soundproof glass and observe the herd from above, no feeding, no tricks, just elephants being elephants. And there was Moyo, often near the center, not hiding anymore. I remember a particular moment, almost a year after his arrival. A group of children from a school in Rotterdam had come for a program visit. I was in the viewing dome giving a presentation. One girl, maybe 9 years old, pointed at Moyo and asked, "Is he sad?" The room went quiet. I looked down through the glass. Moyo was standing beside Goma, trunks touching. Nearby, Nico and Batu were mock wrestling in the dust. The sun was out. The grass shimmered gold. No, I said. He was. But not anymore. Moyo now participates in what we call choice-based healthcare. That means he's never forced into anything, no sedation for foot care or blood draws. He's trained through positive reinforcement to step onto platforms, lift his feet, open his mouth, and even allow sonograms, because he trusts us. He chooses to engage. Some mornings, he waits near the barn until the keepers come with his favorite enrichment, a heavy tire filled with frozen fruit. Other days, he's harder to find, wandering far into the back acres. And that's okay. That's the point. He's his own elephant now. It's been over 3 years since we pulled him from that circus. I sometimes go back and look at the photos from that first day, his hollow frame, sunken cheeks, that broken ear. Then I look at him now. Nearly 5,000 kilograms of power and presence. A healed soul in a real herd. A few months ago, during a quiet evening shift, I saw something I'll never forget. Moyo was lying in the grass, legs tucked beneath him, eyes closed. Nearby, Goma stood, watching over him. Nico dozed under a tree. The scene was utterly peaceful. I walked quietly up the path. Moyo lifted his trunk slightly when he sensed me, then let it fall gently across his tusk. He trusted the world now. Trusted me. I often say that Moyo rescued me as much as I rescued him. He reminded me that healing is possible, even when the damage runs deep. That trust can return, if you give it space and time. And that sometimes, the quietest triumphs, like an elephant choosing to lie down and sleep under an open sky, are the most powerful stories we have to tell.